Let me tell you something that might shock you. If I woke up tomorrow morning with absolutely nothing, not a single dollar to my name, no investments, no business interests, no reputation to trade on, just the clothes on my back and the knowledge in my head, I am completely confident I could rebuild substantial wealth, even at 70 years old, even starting from absolute zero. Now, I know what you are thinking. Easy for you to say. You have spent a lifetime studying investing. You have connections most people could never dream of. You have skills that took decades to develop. How is this relevant to ordinary people who do not have your background or your experience? And that is exactly why I want to have this conversation today. Because the principles I would use to rebuild have nothing to do with special connections or unique genius. They have everything to do with fundamental truths about wealth creation that anyone can apply at any age from any starting point. These are not secrets available only to the privileged few. They are timeless principles that have worked for centuries and will continue to work for anyone willing to apply them. I have thought about this question deeply over the years. It is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a way of pressure testing my understanding of how wealth actually works. If I strip away all the advantages, all the accumulated resources, all the compounding that has happened over decades, what is left? What are the core principles that actually create wealth from nothing? The answers have shaped how I think about money, about business, about life itself. And today I am going to share exactly what I would do step by step if I had to start completely over at 70 years old. I am going to be specific. I am going to be practical. And I am going to explain the reasoning behind every step so you can apply these principles in your own situation. Before I dive into the specific steps, let me tell you a story that illustrates why I believe so strongly that wealth can be rebuilt at any age. Back in the 1970s, I knew a man who had been a successful businessman in his 40s. He had built a chain of retail stores that was doing well. He had a nice home, nice cars, all the trappings of success. Then the economy turned, his industry changed, and within 2 years he had lost everything. Bankruptcy, divorce. He was starting over at 48 with nothing but debt and regret. Most people in this situation would have given up. They would have accepted a diminished life, taken some safe job, and spent the remaining years bitter about what they had lost. But this man did something different.
He took stock of what he still had, which was mainly knowledge about retail and relationships with suppliers, and he started a tiny consulting business helping other retailers improve their operations.
He charged almost nothing at first. He lived in a small apartment. He ate cheap food. But every dollar he made above his basic expenses, he saved and invested. He bought shares of quality companies, reinvested the dividends, and let compounding work. Within 10 years, he had rebuilt a net worth of several $1 million. By the time he reached 70, he was wealthier than he had ever been before his bankruptcy. This story is not unique. History is full of people who lost everything and rebuilt. What separates them from those who stay defeated is not luck or special ability. It is the discipline to apply proven principles consistently over time. And those principles are exactly what I am going to share with you today. Let me start with the first thing I would do, and it might surprise you. I would spend one full day doing absolutely nothing productive. I would allow myself to feel the loss. I would let the disappointment wash over me. I would probably feel sorry for myself for a few hours. I would acknowledge the grief that comes from losing everything you have built, and then I would be done with it. This might seem like wasted time, but it is actually essential. The people who fail to rebuild after a catastrophic loss are usually the ones who either suppress their emotions entirely and burn out later from the unprocessed stress, or the ones who wallow in self-pity indefinitely and never take action. Neither approach works. What works is acknowledging the loss, processing it quickly, and then moving forward with clear eyes and full energy. One day of grieving, then back to work. This is not about being cold or unfeeling. It is about being practical. The loss already happened. No amount of mourning will undo it. The only question is what you do next. The second thing I would do is take a complete inventory of what I actually have. Not money, because in this scenario I have none, but assets of a different kind. Skills, knowledge, time, physical health, mental clarity, relationships. These are forms of capital that most people dramatically undervalue. Let me be specific about each of these. Skills are things you know how to do. Maybe you know how to fix things, or sell things, or organize things, or teach things, or create things. Every skill you have ever developed remains with you even when your bank account hits zero. These skills are the raw material from which new income will be generated. Knowledge is what you understand about how the world works. Knowledge about specific industries. Knowledge about human psychology. Knowledge about what makes businesses succeed or fail. Knowledge about how to avoid the mistakes that destroy wealth. This knowledge is accumulated over a lifetime and becomes more valuable with experience. A 70-year-old starting over has far more knowledge than a 25-year-old, and that knowledge is a genuine competitive advantage. Time is the resource that allows you to deploy your skills and knowledge. At 70, I would have less time than a young person, but I might reasonably expect another 15 to 20 years of productive activity with good health. That is enough time to build substantial wealth if used wisely. Physical health determines how much energy you can bring to your rebuilding efforts. At 70, health requires more attention and maintenance than at 30. But with proper care, diet, exercise, and medical attention, many 70-year-olds remain highly capable and energetic. Health is an asset that must be protected and maintained. Mental clarity is your ability to think clearly, make good decisions, and maintain focus over time. This is arguably more important than physical health for wealth building. A person with a sharp mind and declining body can still build wealth. A person with a strong body and a confused mind cannot. Relationships are connections with other people who might provide opportunities, support, advice, or simply encouragement. I am not talking about exploiting relationships for financial gain. I am talking about the human connections that provide context and meaning to life and that occasionally open doors to legitimate opportunities. I would make a comprehensive list of all these assets. What skills do I have? What knowledge have I accumulated? How much productive time can I reasonably expect? What is my current health status and what would it take to optimize it? What relationships do I have that provide genuine value in my life? This inventory would form the foundation of my rebuilding strategy, because wealth is not built from money. Wealth is built from deploying other forms of capital effectively. Money is the result, not the starting point. The third thing I would do is secure immediate stability. Before I could think about building wealth, I would need to make sure I could survive. Food on the table, roof over my head, basic necessities covered, utilities paid, transportation to get to work if needed. At 70 in America, this might mean Social Security if I had worked enough quarters to qualify. Social Security is not much, but it provides a baseline income that covers at least some basic expenses. This creates a foundation from which to build. Beyond Social Security, I would find whatever legitimate work was immediately available to generate additional cash flow. At 70, this might mean part-time work suited to my physical capabilities. It might mean consulting or advisory work if I had expertise others valued. It might mean gig economy work like driving or delivery if nothing else was available. So whatever it took to generate income beyond basic Social Security. I would not be proud about this. Pride is the enemy of rebuilding. The person who refuses to take a job they consider beneath them, who refuses to accept help from others, who prioritizes their ego over their survival, that person will not rebuild successfully. If I needed to work at a retail store or answer phones in an office or do yard work for neighbors, I would do it without hesitation. The specific work does not matter. What matters is generating income to stabilize my situation. I might also need to rely on family or friends temporarily for support. This is difficult for someone who has been independent and successful. But again, pride must be set aside. If family could provide temporary housing or help with expenses while I got back on my feet, accepting that help would be the smart thing to do. I would be clear about my plan to become self-sufficient again as quickly as possible, and I would work hard to minimize the duration of any dependence. During this stabilization phase, I would also become absolutely ruthless about expenses. I would move to the cheapest housing I could find that was safe and clean. A small apartment, a room in a shared house, whatever. Minimize my housing cost. I would cut every expense that was not absolutely essential. No cable television, no streaming services, no dining out, no entertainment expenses, no subscriptions, no new clothes unless absolutely necessary. I would cook all my own meals with the cheapest nutritious ingredients available. Rice and beans, eggs, chicken, frozen vegetables. Simple, healthy food that cost as little as possible. I would walk instead of driving when feasible. I would use the library instead of buying books. I would find free entertainment instead of paying for it. This might sound like deprivation, but I would not experience it that way. I would experience it as progress. Every dollar I did not spend on consumption was a dollar I could save or invest. Every expense I eliminated brought me closer to financial stability. The discipline of extreme frugality would become a source of pride rather than shame. And let me be clear about the mathematics here. Wealth is built from the gap between income and expenses. The larger that gap, the faster wealth accumulates. When you are starting from zero, every single dollar matters enormously. A dollar saved is a dollar that can be invested and compound over time. A dollar wasted is a dollar that never works for you again. At 70, with limited time for compounding to work, maximizing that gap between income and expenses would be even more critical than for a younger person. I would treat every dollar as precious. I would question every expense, and I would direct maximum resources toward building for the future. The fourth thing I would do is find a way to generate meaningful income beyond basic subsistence. Covering expenses is necessary but not sufficient. To build wealth, you need surplus income that can be invested. You need to generate more than you consume, and then you need to productively deploy that surplus. At 70, with my specific background and expertise, I would probably look for opportunities to provide consulting or advisory services related to investing in business. There are always people who need help with financial decisions, business owners who need strategic advice, individuals who need investment guidance, companies that need board members with experience. But I want to address this scenario more broadly. What if I did not have specialized expertise in investing or business? What if I was truly starting as an ordinary 70-year-old with no particular specialized knowledge? The answer is that income generation is still absolutely possible. The modern economy offers countless opportunities to generate income by providing services to others, and these opportunities do not require advanced degrees or specialized certifications. Consider the following possibilities, all of which are available to a 70-year-old starting from zero. handyman services for those who are physically capable. Many people, especially busy professionals and elderly homeowners, need help with basic home repairs and maintenance. If you can fix a leaky faucet, patch drywall, paint a room, or assemble furniture, you can charge for these services. The work is flexible, the demand is constant, and the hourly rates can be quite reasonable. Bookkeeping and administrative support. Many small businesses need help with basic bookkeeping, data entry, scheduling, and administrative tasks. If you are organized, reliable, and comfortable with basic computer programs, you can provide these services. Many of them can be done remotely from home. Tutoring and teaching. If you have knowledge in any academic subject or practical knowledge in any field, there are people who will pay to learn from you. This includes school subjects for students, test preparation, musical instruments, languages, crafts, skills, almost anything you know how to do well, pet care, and house sitting. Many people travel for work or pleasure and need someone to care for their pets or watch their homes. This is work that requires reliability and trustworthiness, qualities that a 70-year-old often has in abundance compared to younger workers. Errand running and personal assistance. Busy professionals often need help with shopping, pickups, deliveries, waiting for service providers, and other time-consuming tasks. Personal assistant services are in demand and can command good hourly rates. Driving services. If you have a reliable vehicle and a good driving record, rideshare and delivery services provide flexible income opportunities. The work can be done on your own schedule and generates immediate cash flow. The key insight is that income is not limited by your resume or your credentials or your age. It is limited by your willingness to create value for others. If you can solve problems for people, if you can make their lives easier, if you can provide services they need, you can generate income. The specific form does not matter as much as the principle. I would start with whatever opportunities were immediately available. I would not wait for the perfect opportunity. I would take action immediately to generate cash flow, and then I would continuously look for ways to increase my income over time. This might mean moving to higher value services as I identified what was most in demand. It might mean serving more clients by working more hours initially. It might mean raising my prices as I developed a reputation for quality work. It might mean developing new skills that would command higher rates. The goal would be constant improvement, relentlessly pushing my income higher. The fifth thing I would do is start investing immediately, even with tiny amounts. Most people think you need significant capital before investing makes sense. They wait until they have saved a substantial sum before opening a brokerage account. This is a costly mistake that wastes years of potential learning and compounding. If I could only invest $10 per week, I would start immediately. Modern brokerage platforms have eliminated minimum investment requirements and trading fees. You can buy fractional shares of any company with any amount of money. There is no longer any barrier to entry except psychological. Why start investing with tiny amounts? Two critically important reasons. First, investing is a skill that requires practice to develop. You need to learn how to evaluate investments. You need to develop the emotional discipline to hold through volatility. You need to understand how markets work, how companies report results, how to read financial statements, how to assess valuation. The sooner you start practicing, the sooner you develop these essential capabilities. And here is the crucial point. It is much better to make your inevitable beginner mistakes with small amounts of money. Everyone makes mistakes when they start investing. If you make those mistakes with $10, you learn the lesson cheaply. If you wait until you have $10,000 to start, those same mistakes cost you 100 times more. Second, the habit of regular investing is more important than the amount invested. If you develop the habit of investing every single week, That habit will persist as your income grows. You will automatically invest larger amounts as your surplus increases, because investing regularly is simply what you do. It becomes automatic. People who wait until they have meaningful capital often never develop this habit. They save up money, then spend it on something else. They never establish the discipline of regular investing, and they never benefit from the compounding that regular investing produces. So I would open a brokerage account with one of the free platforms available today. I would link it to my bank account. I would set up automatic transfers every week, even if only $5 or $10. And I would start buying fractional shares of quality companies. At 70, starting from zero, my investment approach would be conservative. I am not going to speculate on high-risk stocks or chase the latest hot sector or try to find the next company that will increase tenfold. I do not have time to recover from major investment losses, so avoiding losses becomes paramount. I would focus my investments on the most stable, most established, most reliable companies in the world, companies that have paid dividends for decades without interruption, companies that sell products people need every day, regardless of economic conditions, companies that will still be in business and still generating profits when I am 80 and 90. Let me be specific about the types of companies. I mean, consumer staples, companies like Procter & Gamble, which has paid dividends without interruption for over a century. These companies sell toothpaste and detergent and diapers and razors and other products that people buy regardless of whether the economy is booming or crashing. Demand for these products is remarkably stable, which makes the businesses remarkably stable. Healthcare companies like Johnson & Johnson, which has increased its dividend for over 60 consecutive years. People need health care regardless of economic conditions. They need bandages and medications and medical devices. This consistent demand translates to consistent profits and consistent dividends. Beverage companies like Coca-Cola, which generates cash flow from selling products in over 200 countries around the world. Whether times are good or bad, people still buy beverages. The business is simple, the brand is powerful, and the dividend has been paid without fail for generations. These might seem like boring investments. They absolutely are boring. That is precisely the point. At 70, starting over, I do not want excitement. I want reliability. I want dividends that arrive every quarter, like clockwork. I want share prices that grow steadily over time rather than swinging wildly up and down. Conservative investing might produce lower returns than more aggressive approaches in good years, but it also avoids the catastrophic losses that can occur with aggressive approaches in bad years. When you are 70 and starting from zero, avoiding catastrophic loss is more important than maximizing upside. Capital preservation comes first. The sixth thing I would do is focus relentlessly on increasing my income over time. Once basic expenses were covered and I had established an investing habit, income growth would become the primary driver of wealth building. Here is the mathematics that most people do not fully appreciate. Your investment returns depend on how much you have invested. If you have $1,000 invested and earn 10%, you make $100. If you have $100,000 invested and earn 10%, you make $10,000. Same percentage return, very different dollar amount. This means that in the early years of wealth building, when your investment portfolio is small, the returns from that portfolio are almost insignificant. What really drives wealth accumulation is the amount you are able to add to the portfolio each year. And that amount is determined by the gap between your income and your expenses. Since I would already have pushed expenses to a reasonable minimum during the stabilization phase, the primary lever for increasing wealth accumulation would be increasing income. Every additional dollar of income would be a dollar available for investment, and every dollar invested would compound over time. So I would treat income growth as a primary objective, not a secondary consideration. Every week I would ask myself, what I could do to earn more next week. Every month I would evaluate my income-generating activities and look for improvements. Could I provide more valuable services? If I was doing handyman work, could I develop specialized skills that commanded higher rates? If I was doing bookkeeping, could I learn more advanced accounting that allowed me to serve larger clients? Could I serve more clients? Could I work more efficiently and fit more work into the same hours? Could I build systems that allowed me to handle higher volume? Could I raise my prices as I developed a reputation for quality work? Could I charge more for the same services? Many service providers underprice their work. Regular price increases, even small ones, add up significantly over time. Could I create leverage through scalable income? Services trade time for money, which limits earning potential. But some income sources do not require additional time for each dollar earned. Consider the following possibilities. Writing a book based on accumulated knowledge. A book is written once, but can be sold forever. With self-publishing platforms available today, anyone with valuable knowledge can write and publish a book without needing a traditional publisher. The income from book sales arrives whether you are working that day or not. Creating an online course. If you know how to do something valuable, you can create video lessons teaching others. Online course platforms handle all the technology. Once the course is created, it can be sold to students indefinitely with no additional time investment per student. Building a content platform, writing a blog or newsletter, or creating videos that attract an audience. Once you have an audience, you can monetize through advertising, sponsorships, or selling products. The income scales with audience size rather than with hours worked. At 70, these scalable income approaches would be particularly attractive because they could continue generating income even as my energy for service work declined. A book I wrote at 75 could still be generating royalties at 85. A course I created could still be helping students years after I made it. The seventh thing I would do is protect what I was building with increasing vigilance as it accumulated. Every dollar I managed to accumulate represented time I could not recover. Losing a significant portion of my portfolio would be devastating in a way it would not be for a 30-year-old who had decades to recover. So investment protection would become more and more important as my portfolio grew. This meant several things practically. No concentrated positions. I would not put a large percentage of my portfolio into any single investment, no matter how attractive it seemed. Diversification protects against the risk that any one investment fails catastrophically. I would spread my investments across multiple companies in multiple industries. No speculative bets. I would not buy stocks in unproven companies, hoping they would become the next big thing. I would stick with established companies that had long track records of generating profits and paying dividends. This is not exciting, but it is safe. No leverage. I would not borrow money to invest. Leverage amplifies both gains and losses. When you are starting from zero at 70, you cannot afford amplified losses. A leveraged position that moves against you can leave you worse off than when you started and in debt besides. No amount of potential upside justifies that risk. No investments I did not understand. The financial world is full of complex products that promise high returns. Derivatives, structured products, alternative investments, cryptocurrency, private placements. Some of these might be legitimate opportunities. But if I do not thoroughly understand how something works, I cannot evaluate whether the promised returns are realistic or whether the risks are acceptable. So I would stick with simple investments I understood completely. Protection also meant managing non-investment risks that could derail my progress. Health would be the top priority. At 70, health problems become more likely and more serious. Getting significantly ill would not only be personally devastating, it would destroy my ability to generate income and would potentially deplete my accumulated savings through medical costs. So I would invest heavily in maintaining my health. This would mean daily exercise, even moderate exercise like walking. It would mean careful attention to diet, eating foods that support long-term health rather than just satisfying short-term cravings. It would mean regular medical checkups to catch problems early when they are more treatable. It would mean adequate sleep and stress management. Health would be treated as the valuable asset it is. I would also maintain appropriate insurance against catastrophic events, health insurance to protect against medical costs, liability insurance if I was providing services to others, whatever protection was available and affordable to ensure that a single bad event could not wipe out everything I had built. The eighth thing I would do is stay patient and allow compounding to work its magic over time. This is perhaps the hardest part of wealth building, and it becomes even harder when you are starting late and feel the pressure of limited time. Compounding is a remarkable force, but it works slowly at first and then accelerates dramatically later. The early years feel painfully slow. You invest diligently every month, and your portfolio balance barely seems to grow. The investment returns are small because the base amount is small. You wonder whether the effort is even worthwhile. Then gradually, almost imperceptibly, something changes. The portfolio gets large enough that returns become meaningful. Returns generate their own returns. The growth rate increases even if you are not adding additional money. By the later years, the compounding is doing most of the work. Let me illustrate with specific numbers. Suppose I was able to invest $2,000 per month, $24,000 per year, and suppose my investments earned 7% annually. After just 1 year, I would have about $25,000. The compounding contribution is minimal because the base is small. After 5 years, I would have about $140,000. Still modest, but growing. After 10 years, I would have about $330,000. Now the compounding is really starting to work. Even if I stopped adding money, this portfolio would grow to nearly $650,000 in another 10 years at the same return rate. This is why patience is essential. The rewards for consistent investing come later, not sooner. The person who gives up after a few years because progress seems slow will never experience the acceleration that comes later. The person who stays the course will be rewarded with dramatic growth in the later years. At 70, I would need to calibrate my expectations to my realistic timeline. I might not have 30 or 40 years for compounding to work its full magic, but I could reasonably expect 10 to 20 years with good health. And even 10 years of consistent investing and compounding produces meaningful results, as the numbers above illustrate. The key is staying patient during the slow early years, trusting the process, continuing to invest consistently even when the portfolio balance seems stubbornly small, knowing that the acceleration is coming even if it is not visible yet. Now let me talk about the psychological challenges of starting over at 70, because these are often more difficult to overcome than the practical challenges. The practical steps are clear enough. The psychological barriers are what actually stop most people. The first major psychological challenge is ego. When you have been successful, when you have accumulated wealth and status, when you have been respected in your community for your accomplishments, starting over is profoundly humiliating. You have to acknowledge that something went wrong. You have to ask for help from others. You have to take jobs that feel beneath your former station. You have to live in circumstances that seem shameful compared to your previous lifestyle. Every interaction with people who knew your former success becomes awkward and uncomfortable. This ego challenge destroys many people who attempt to rebuild. They are so attached to their former identity, so unwilling to accept their current reality, that they cannot take the humble steps required to improve their situation. They would rather maintain the illusion of their former status than do the work necessary to build new success. I would deal with this by remembering that ego is the enemy of progress. The only thing that matters is what I actually do, not how it looks or how it makes me feel. If starting at the bottom is what the situation requires, then I start at the bottom without complaint. If doing humble work is necessary, I do humble work without resentment. The people who rebuild successfully are the ones who can set aside their pride and focus on practical action. The ones who fail are the ones who let ego prevent them from taking necessary steps. The second psychological challenge is fear. At 70, starting from zero, the stakes feel enormously high. There is limited time to recover from mistakes. Every decision feels weighted with consequence. This awareness can create paralyzing fear that prevents any action at all. You become so afraid of making the wrong choice that you make no choice. You analyze endlessly without deciding. You wait for certainty that never comes. Meanwhile, time passes and nothing changes. I would deal with fear by focusing on process rather than outcomes. I cannot control whether the stock market goes up or down. I cannot guarantee that my income-generating efforts will succeed. I cannot eliminate all the uncertainties in life. But I can control my own actions. I can show up every day and do the work. I can maintain discipline in my spending. I can invest consistently. I can continue learning and improving. If I focus on executing the right process consistently, the outcomes will take care of themselves over time. The third psychological challenge is regret. Looking backward instead of forward, dwelling on what could have been different. If only I had been more careful. If only I had seen the risk coming. If only I had made different choices at critical moments. This regret is natural but destructive. It changes nothing about the past while consuming energy and attention that should be directed toward the future. It can lead to depression, paralysis, and despair. I would deal with regret by acknowledging it briefly and then deliberately releasing it. Yes, mistakes were made. Yes, things could have been different, but dwelling on that changes nothing. The only thing I can control is what I do from this moment forward. Every minute spent on regret is a minute stolen from building the future. The fourth psychological challenge is envy. Seeing others who have what you lost, friends who are comfortable in retirement, former colleagues who maintain their wealth, family members who did not make your mistakes. It is natural to compare your situation to theirs and feel bitter about the difference. Envy is poison. It makes you resentful and bitter. It focuses your attention on what others have rather than what you are building, and it accomplishes absolutely nothing constructive. I would deal with envy by remembering that everyone walks their own path. Other people's successes do not diminish my potential. Their wealth does not reduce what I can build. The only comparison that matters is between where I am today and where I was yesterday. If I am making progress, I am succeeding. The fifth psychological challenge is maintaining hope when the goal seems impossibly distant. When you are 70 and starting from zero, the finish line looks very far away. Daily progress feels insignificant. It is easy to conclude that success is impossible and give up. I would maintain hope by celebrating small wins and tracking progress carefully. Every week that I increased my income slightly would be recognized as a victory. Every month that I added to my investment portfolio would be marked as progress. Every quarter that showed growth in net worth would be occasion for satisfaction. I would also study the stories of others who had rebuilt successfully from difficult circumstances. These stories prove that success is possible. If others did it, I can do it too. Their examples provide both instruction and inspiration. Let me now share some specific tactical approaches I would use to accelerate the rebuilding process. First, I would audit and optimize my use of time ruthlessly. At 70, time is the scarcest resource. Every hour matters. I would track exactly how I spent my time for a full week. Then I would identify every activity that did not directly contribute to income generation, wealth building, health maintenance, or genuine rest and renewal, and I would eliminate or minimize those activities. No mindless television watching, no scrolling through social media, no pointless conversations that went nowhere, no social obligations undertaken purely from guilt or habit. Every hour would be directed toward high-value activities. Second, I would leverage any advantages that remain from my former life. Even starting from zero financially, I might have other advantages. Perhaps some professional reputation that would help me find consulting work. Perhaps relationships that could provide introductions to opportunities. Perhaps specialized knowledge that had market value. I would not be too proud to leverage whatever advantages existed. The goal is rebuilding wealth, not proving I can do it without any help at all. Third, I would invest in continuous learning and skill development. The world changes constantly. What worked 5 years ago might not work today. New opportunities emerge as old ones fade. I would stay curious about new developments. I would learn new skills when they would increase my income potential. I would remain adaptable rather than rigid. Fourth, I would seek mentors and advisors who had navigated similar challenges. Many people have rebuilt from difficult circumstances. They have learned lessons through painful experience that I could absorb without making the same mistakes. I would seek out these people, ask for their guidance, and learn from their journeys. Fifth, I would document my progress and my learnings. Writing about my experiences would clarify my thinking. It would create a record I could review and learn from. It might eventually become a resource I could share with others facing similar challenges. And the discipline of regular documentation would keep me focused on consistent progress. Now let me address what I would definitely not do, because avoiding critical mistakes is just as important as taking the right actions. I would not take excessive risks trying to accelerate the rebuilding process. The temptation would be enormous. I would see my limited time and want to move faster. I would hear about investments that promise quick returns. I would be tempted to bet big on something that could make me wealthy fast. But excessive risk is exactly how people who start over end up with nothing again. The path to rebuilding is steady and consistent, not fast and risky. Get-rich-quick schemes almost always produce get-poor-quick results. I would resist the temptation no matter how appealing it seemed. I would not use leverage or borrowed money to invest. Leverage amplifies returns when things go well, but it also amplifies losses when things go badly. And when you are starting from zero at 70, you absolutely cannot afford amplified losses. A leveraged bet that goes wrong could leave you in debt with no time to recover. The downside is catastrophic, and no potential upside justifies it. I would not invest in anything I did not thoroughly understand. Complex financial products and exotic investments promise high returns. Some deliver, many do not. If I cannot explain exactly how an investment works and exactly what risks it carries, I would not put money into it. Sticking with simple investments I understood would be far safer than reaching for returns through complexity. I would not trust anyone else with my money without doing extensive due diligence. The financial industry is full of people who profit by separating others from their wealth. Advisors who charge fees, whether their advice helps or hurts. Salespeople who push products that benefit them more than their clients. Outright fraudsters who prey on hope and desperation. As someone starting over at 70, I would be an obvious target for these predators. I would verify everything myself. I would make my own decisions based on my own analysis. I would trust no one based on credentials or confident presentation. Finally, I would not isolate myself or try to rebuild entirely alone. The psychological challenges of starting over are real and substantial. Going through them without support makes everything harder. I would maintain relationships with friends and family. I would be honest about my situation. I would accept emotional support even when I could not accept financial support. I would remember that relationships and human connection have value beyond any financial consideration. Let me close with some broader reflections on what this exercise reveals about wealth and about life. Losing everything is genuinely devastating. I do not want to minimize that reality. The financial loss is painful. The psychological impact is profound. The change in circumstances and identity is difficult to process. Anyone who has experienced significant financial loss knows how crushing it can be. But losing everything is also clarifying in a strange way. It strips away illusions about what really matters. It reveals your true capabilities when external advantages are removed. It shows whether you have the character to persevere through adversity or whether you collapse when things get difficult. Some people are destroyed by losing everything. Others discover through the experience that they are stronger and more capable than they ever realized. The difference is not about luck or circumstances. It is about mindset and action. If I lost everything at 70, I would choose to be in the second group. I would see the loss as a test of everything I had learned over a lifetime. I would approach the rebuilding as a worthy challenge. I would prove to myself that my knowledge and character were more valuable than any sum of money. And here is the deeper truth that this entire exercise reveals. The principles I would use to rebuild from nothing at 70 are exactly the same principles that work for building wealth at any age from any starting point. Minimize expenses ruthlessly. Maximize income continuously. Invest the surplus consistently in quality assets. Protect what you build against catastrophic loss. Stay patient and let compounding work over time. These principles are simple to understand and difficult to execute consistently. They are not exciting or glamorous. They do not promise quick riches, but they work. They have always worked throughout human history, and they will continue to work for anyone willing to apply them with discipline over extended periods. The reason most people never build significant wealth is not that they lack opportunity or ability. It is that they lack the discipline to apply these principles consistently year after year. They spend more than they earn. They fail to invest regularly. They chase speculation instead of building steadily. They give up when progress seems slow. Anyone who develops the discipline to execute these fundamentals can build wealth. The starting point matters far less than the consistency of execution. A 30-year-old starting with nothing will become wealthy if they apply these principles for 30 years. A 70-year-old starting with nothing will accumulate meaningful wealth if they apply these principles for 10 or 15 years. The path is there. The principles are known. The only question is whether you have the discipline and patience to walk the path consistently until you reach your destination. That is exactly how I would rebuild if I lost everything at 70. Through the steady, consistent application of timeless principles that are available to anyone willing to apply them, not through luck or genius or special advantages, through discipline, patience, and persistent effort over time. The fundamentals never change. The path remains open to all. The invitation is extended to everyone who is willing to accept it. Now let me share a detailed timeline of how I would expect the rebuilding process to unfold, because having realistic expectations is essential for maintaining motivation through the difficult early years. In the first 6 months, my focus would be entirely on stabilization, finding stable housing, establishing basic income, cutting expenses to the bone, opening investment accounts, and beginning to invest even tiny amounts. This period would feel chaotic and uncertain. Progress would be hard to measure. The goal is simply to establish a stable foundation from which to build. By the end of year 1, I would expect to have achieved basic stability, housing secured, income exceeding minimal expenses, a small but growing investment portfolio, the foundations of a new life in place. I would not expect significant wealth accumulation during this first year. The focus is on establishing the systems and habits that will produce wealth over time. During years 2 and 3, I would expect to see meaningful progress in income growth. The early scramble for any available work would give way to more strategic income generation. I would have identified what services I could provide most effectively. I would be developing expertise and reputation. Income would be growing measurably month over month. Investment contributions would increase as income grew. The portfolio would still be small, but the habit of regular investing would be firmly established. I might have $20,000 or $30,000 invested by the end of year 3. Modest by most standards, but real progress from zero. During years 4 and 5, the momentum would build, income streams would be optimized, investment contributions would be substantial. The portfolio would be large enough that returns were becoming noticeable. The compounding would be starting to work, even if the effects were still relatively modest. By the end of year 5, I would hope to have somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 in invested assets, depending on how successfully I had grown income and maintained expense discipline. This would still be far from wealthy by conventional standards, but it would represent real wealth built from nothing in just 5 years. During years 6 through 10, the acceleration would become dramatic. The portfolio would be large enough that investment returns contributed meaningfully to growth. Even if I added nothing new, the existing investments would grow substantially on their own. Combined with continued contributions, the wealth accumulation would accelerate noticeably. By year 10, at age 80, I would hope to have accumulated somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000. Again, the exact amount would depend on income growth, expense discipline, investment returns, and market conditions. But the range is realistic for someone following this approach consistently. This amount might not seem like a fortune. Compared to what I might have accumulated over a full career of investing, it would be modest. But remember the starting point. $0 at age 70, building hundreds of thousands of dollars in a decade from that starting point would be a remarkable achievement. And this wealth would provide genuine security. With $200,000 or $300,000 invested conservatively and generating dividends, plus Social Security, plus perhaps some part-time income, a comfortable retirement would be entirely possible. Not luxurious, but comfortable and secure. Let me also talk about what I would do differently at each stage of life if I were advising others in similar situations. For someone in their 20s or 30s, starting from zero, the approach would be similar, but the time horizon would change everything. With 40 or 50 years ahead, you can afford to take more risk because you have time to recover from mistakes. You can invest more aggressively in growth stocks rather than conservative dividend payers. You can take career risks that might not pay off for years. Time is the greatest asset, and it should be deployed aggressively. For someone in their 40s or 50s starting over, the balance shifts. There is still meaningful time for compounding, but less margin for error. The approach should be somewhat more conservative than for a young person, but still allow for growth. Career reinvention is still entirely possible. Building substantial wealth over 15 to 20 years is absolutely achievable. For someone in their 60s, the approach starts to resemble what I have described for 70. Capital preservation becomes increasingly important. Income generation takes precedence over speculation. Conservative investments that produce reliable income make more sense than growth investments that might not pay off for decades. And for someone in their 70s, like the scenario I've been describing, the approach should be, as I have outlined, maximum focus on income generation, ruthless expense control, conservative investing focused on dividends and capital preservation, patient accumulation over whatever time remains. The principles remain the same at every age. Only the specific applications change based on time horizon and risk capacity. Let me also address a question that might be on your mind. What if I tried all of this and failed? What if the income opportunities did not materialize? What if health problems intervened? What if the investments performed poorly? What if everything went wrong? This is a fair question. And the honest answer is that success is not guaranteed. Following these principles dramatically improves your odds of rebuilding wealth. But nothing in life is certain. Some people do everything right and still face adverse outcomes. If I tried to rebuild and failed despite my best efforts, I would take comfort in knowing that I did not give up. I would know that I applied everything I had learned over a lifetime. I would not have to wonder what might have been if I had really tried. There is dignity in making your best effort regardless of outcome. And practically speaking, even a failed attempt at rebuilding would likely leave me better off than giving up from the start. Even partial success would improve my circumstances. Some wealth is better than no wealth. Some income is better than no income. Some progress is better than no progress. The downside of trying and failing is not much worse than not trying at all. The upside of trying and succeeding is dramatically better. When you do the expected value calculation, trying hard to rebuild is obviously the right choice. Let me also share some thoughts on the importance of purpose in the rebuilding process. When you are working hard, sacrificing pleasures, and delaying gratification, you need a reason that sustains you through the difficulty. Money for its own sake is not a strong enough motivator. You need a purpose beyond just accumulating wealth. For me, that purpose has always been independence, the ability to make my own choices without being constrained by financial necessity, the freedom to spend my time as I choose, the security of knowing I can handle whatever challenges life presents. These things matter to me more than the money itself. For others, the purpose might be different. Providing for family, leaving a legacy, supporting causes you believe in, having resources to help others. Whatever your purpose, connecting your rebuilding efforts to something larger than yourself provides motivation that pure financial goals cannot match. I would recommend that anyone starting over at 70 or any age spend time clarifying their purpose. Why does rebuilding matter to you? What will the money enable that you value? What kind of life do you want to live? And how does financial security support that life? These questions deserve thoughtful answers. Finally, let me end with this observation. The scenario I have been discussing, losing everything at 70, is extreme. Most people will never face such a complete reset so late in life. But the principles I have described are not just for extreme situations. These same principles apply if you are behind on retirement savings and want to catch up. They apply if you have experienced a setback and need to rebuild. They apply if you simply want to improve your financial situation from wherever you currently stand. Start with what you have, minimize expenses, maximize income, invest consistently in quality assets, protect what you build, stay patient, let compounding work. These fundamentals work regardless of starting point, regardless of age, regardless of circumstances. The path to financial security is not complicated, it is not mysterious, it does not require special knowledge or connections or luck. It requires only the discipline to execute proven principles consistently over time. That discipline is available to anyone who chooses to develop it. The path is open to all who are willing to walk it. And the destination, financial security and independence, is worth whatever effort it takes to get there. That is how I would rebuild if I lost everything at 70. And that is how anyone can improve their financial situation from wherever they stand today. The principles are timeless. The opportunity is real. The only question is whether you will take action. I hope you will. And remember this, the best time to start building wealth was decades ago. The second best time is today. Whatever your age, whatever your situation, whatever setbacks you have experienced, today is the day to begin. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect. Today, every journey begins with a single step. Take that step now. Open the investment account. Cut the unnecessary expense. Find the additional income opportunity. Whatever the first action is for you, take it today. Because wealth is not built through grand gestures or perfect timing. It is built through small, consistent actions repeated day after day, month after month, year after year. Each individual action seems insignificant, but accumulated over time, they produce remarkable results That is the real secret to building wealth. There is no secret. There is only discipline, consistency, and time. Anyone can do it. The only question is whether you will choose to begin.